I said so many times on the podcast before, the transfer portal in the NFL draft, it can giveth. It can give you so many opportunities to build your program. But the transfer portal in the NFL draft can also taketh away. And LSU has both benefited and fallen victim to both of those things, all within a matter of a few hours. So, what exactly was it, and how does that affect LSU moving forward? We'll get into all of that, plus so much more, on today's edition of Locked in LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked in LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Plus, we're on YouTube as well. So check us out wherever you listen to your podcast, but also check us out on YouTube. And of course, Locked in LSU, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I'm your host, as I am every single day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering LSU sports for a long time now, and I'm now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. But let's get into it. I always say transfer portal, NFL draft, it can giveth. Transfer portal can give you depth, can give you experience. It can help you build up your team whenever you really need it. We've seen that. We've seen LSU reap the benefits of the transfer portal in the 2021 season. Also, as weirdly enough as it sounds, the NFL draft can grant your team wonderful opportunities as well. Yes, the NFL draft means that there's going to be a lot of talent that takes away from your program. But also think about the reputation that LSU has of just pumping out NFL players every single year. That there's not going to be the first round of the NFL draft, or maybe not even a single round of the NFL draft in which a LSU player doesn't get named or his name doesn't get called. That gives your program the reputation that LSU's does of being a powerhouse program. Both of those things can grant you wonderful opportunities. But the transfer portal and the NFL draft are kind of a double-edged sword, because while they grant you so many opportunities, they can also take players and opportunities away. The NFL draft, like I mentioned, takes some of your best players away. Also with the transfer portal as well. That while you can build your program up through the transfer portal, every player within your program is afforded the same opportunities that those players were afforded that you brought into your program. And the most recent player in which LSU has fallen victim to of leaving through the transfer portal rather, is Demario Tolan, who just announced on Wednesday that he is leaving LSU after his true freshman season and will enter the transfer portal. So like I mentioned, he's a freshman linebacker, entered the transfer portal Wednesday night, former 4-star recruit out of Orlando. Now, as a true freshman, Demario Tolan got great opportunities. Got plenty of playing time. Now, he was out against Florida State in the first game of the season. He got back surgery over the summer, so was still recovering, still wasn't 100%. But he played in 12 games this season. Played in the SEC championship game, and then every game before that, barring the Florida State game, and then sat out in the Citrus Bowl. Now, honestly, I didn't really pay that very much mind. I didn't really think too far into that. Frankly, I was focused on quarterback position, the Kayshon Boutte drama and rumors, and him entering the NFL draft. I think my mind was so many other places that I didn't look at Demario Tolan not playing in the Citrus Bowl and thinking too far into it and thinking, he's probably headed out into the transfer portal. Maybe that was short-sighted of me. But I think also we were all just focused on a bowl game, a potential quarterback controversy, wide receiver entering the NFL draft after he decided to come back, like all of these storylines surrounding LSU's program. I didn't really think much of it. And now looking back, I'm thinking, duh, that should have been, the biggest red flag. But again, Demario Tolan, true freshman LSU linebacker entering the transfer portal. Now, why is this a big deal? He's a true freshman that played in 12 games, recorded 10 tackles on the season. 4 of those tackles came in the game against Ole Miss, his best game of the season. So what's LSU losing in Demario Tolan? Well, Brian Kelly spoke with the media after the Arkansas game. Remember, close game, gross game offensively. And he was really bragging on the defense, rightfully so. Held Arkansas to 10 points in that game. That's the game that Harold Perkins just absolutely went wild. And Brian Kelly was asked about the defense and not even about Demario Tolan specifically, but felt the need to name Demario Tolan and to single Demario Tolan out. This was Brian Kelly after the Arkansas game.
Was that Greg Penn's best game this year?
It was easily Greg Penn's best game. Now, we challenged him. Because, as you know, Tolan's on his heels, right? He's coming on. He's making progress. He's doing some really good things. And Greg can feel that. And I love the way he responded to that challenge. He played his best game. He played with physicality. He played with great instincts. And that's what we expect out of him. I think he's got to have a great offseason, which he will in the weight room. And he's going to be a heck of a good player for us. But it's nice to have some young guys that are forcing that issue too. So, yeah, it was really good to see him play the way he did.
So Brian Kelly was asked about Greg Penn and his performance against Arkansas. Brian Kelly mentions and makes sure to say, hey, Greg Penn had a great game against Arkansas. But don't you forget about Demario Tolan. Because Demario Tolan has been putting some pressure, a little bit of heat on Greg Penn all week long. That's what's forced him to play better against Arkansas, to have that big kind of game, is because Demario Tolan, as a true freshman, he's nipping at his heels a little bit. And Demario Tolan reminds me a lot of Greg Penn. Greg Penn, sophomore, 2021 was his true freshman season. Demario Tolan played in 12 games as a true freshman. Greg Penn played in 10. Demario Tolan had 12 tackles to finish the year. Greg Penn had 11. Greg Penn in his freshman season had a good bit of playing time. Maybe it wasn't, every single snap kind of player, but showed a whole lot of promise in his freshman season. That's what I saw from Demario Tolan. Greg Penn, I think, took leaps and bounds of improvement in his second year. Greg Penn was a starter in every single game this year. The SEC championship game and also in the Citrus Bowl, recorded 78 tackles, 6 of those for loss. I looked at Greg Penn, and I think it's interestingly enough that, that Brian Kelly is comparing those two. I looked at Greg Penn to be the blueprint for Demario Tolan moving forward. Of, we're going to prove to you that we believe in you, and you're going to earn playing time in your freshman year. And then that a larger role will be carved out for you in year 2. So I think that's what LSU is really losing with Demario Tolan entering the transfer portal, is a guy who's a competitor, a guy as a true freshman has earned a lot of playing time, and a guy that has made playing time kind of uncomfortable in a good way for some of the guys that might have a little bit more experience. I think that's a good thing. I'm talking about the quarterback competition so much throughout this season and looking ahead to the 2023 season. I always say quarterback competitions are a good thing. It pushes every single guy in the room. Not that those guys wouldn't work hard on their own, but I think that it's just natural human instinct that if your job isn't safe, you're going to work that much harder. You're going to stay in the weight room that much longer. You're going to go get treatment a little bit earlier that day because you know that your job isn't safe and you have to compete for that every day. That's what Demario Tolan was for Greg Penn and even the rest of this linebacker room throughout this season. So LSU is not just losing a competitor and a talented player or losing depth. They're also losing one more member to give a little bit of a competitive edge to that room. Now, LSU still has a good bit of depth. Losing depth on defensively is never a good thing, especially considering that you're losing 3 defensive linemen to the NFL draft, 3 certified starters. But looking ahead to 2023, Whit Weeks, of course, will be coming back, a scholarship linebacker, Harold Perkins. Obviously, will be coming back in the 2023 season, also bringing in Whit Weeks in the 2023 class, Whit Weeks' little brother. I'm going to get those two mixed up all the time. I'm already preparing everybody for that. And also 3-star Christian Brathwaite in the 2023 class. So there is depth to this room, but always difficult and always tough to lose a competitor and a really promising young player like Demario Tolan. But coming up next, I say the transfer portal, the NFL draft, taketh away, they also giveth. So I'll explain what I mean by that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about betonline.net. Y'all already know that I love betonline.net. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. Pro football, college bowl season, basketball, both at the NBA and college basketball level. They're You name it, they've got it at betonline.net. So if you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at betonline.net as well. Consider it your one-stop shop, a place where you can wager and also a place where you can get some information, where you can get smarter. It's fast, it's easy, it's a great way to get your betting information. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Make sure you check out the brand new podcast, Locked On College Basketball. Everything that you need to know about college basketball all in one place, wrapped up in a nice little bow. Plus, hear from the big name experts, insiders, coaches, and players. You name it, they've got it. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Now, true freshman linebacker Demario Tolan has entered the transfer portal, but in a totally different position group, LSU is getting something back. Punter Jay Bramblett announced on Thursday morning that he will be returning to LSU in the 2023 season. He posted on Twitter, "This year was the most fun that I've ever had playing the game, and I'm so excited to see the future of LSU football. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to come here. I'm not ready for it to be over, so I'll see y'all back in Baton Rouge for 2023. And I think that this is huge news. You might be listening to this and thinking, really? A punter, like rolling your eyes? I'll tell y'all this. So as you may know, I host a sports talk radio show in Nashville. That means I cover the Tennessee Titans on a daily basis. I talked about the Titans for 3 hours on my new show today. So I cover this team in depth. The Titans, as funny as it sounds, had a little bit of a punter controversy throughout the offseason. Brett Kern, the Titans' most senior player, had been on the team longer than any other player on the team, the punter, Brett Kern. And then the Titans also bring in on the practice squad a rookie punter. His name is Ryan Stonehouse. The punter conversation went on so much longer than I ever expected it to, because I think I knew this. I knew this for certain, and it really came to fruition when we were having this punter controversy talk of, when it comes to special teams and when it comes to punters, you don't really want to think about them. I've said this all throughout the season with the just truly awful and horrendous special teams play that we saw far too often from LSU throughout the season. Was, I don't want to think about special teams. I don't want to be worried about special teams. I don't want to talk about special teams. Because if you're talking about special teams, it's either because special teams did something absolutely tremendous, game-changing plays from special teams, or it's because they did something horrendous. And it was because I was talking about special teams because LSU, unfortunately, did so many horrendous things. So we talked about this punter controversy, at least as the Tennessee Titans were concerned, is because we didn't want to have to worry about the punter. We didn't want to have to talk about a punter controversy because we knew that there was an established and known commodity in Brett Kern at the punting position. We didn't want to have to get ourselves into bed with a certain scenario of, this new unknown punter that we didn't know it was going to be as known or a sure thing as the other punter was. And I use that same kind of mindset when looking at Jay Bramblett's return, is because you don't have to worry about the punter next year. And because he's a good punter. He's in top 20 of college football in average punt distance. He's averaging about 44.5 yards per punt. So knowing that you have a solid punter who has been one of the few bright spots on this special teams returning next year, as the special teams, as I can only hope, looks to improve, hopefully by leaps and bounds next year, I think that's a really big thing. You're returning a good player. You're returning a bright spot on a position group that needs a whole lot of work, that needs to improve next season if LSU wants to get back to Atlanta, compete for an SEC championship game. If LSU wants to continue to be within the conversation of the college football playoff, you can't make the same mistakes that LSU was making on special teams. And Jay Bramblett was not the problem. And I think also, what's invaluable is, I don't care if you're a punter. I don't care if you're a long snapper. I don't care if you're the starting quarterback. I don't care if you're the star wide receiver. It's so valuable to have players on your team and guys in your locker room, leaders on the team that buy into this program. I never questioned that kind of buy-in from Jay Bramblett ever. But I think seeing his Twitter post and him doubling down on his belief in the program and what he really truly believes LSU football can become in 2023. It's nice to hear that. It's reassuring to hear that. And it's always good to have those kinds of guys, the kind of guys that truly buy into your program and really believe what it can become. And they want to be a part of it. I think that's incredibly valuable. And I think that's the positive. That's one of many positives of getting Jay Bramblett back is consistency, leadership on in a position group, and in a one side of the football that struggled is special teams, and getting just a good player, keeping your good players and keeping them in house and not having to worry about a punter, not having to worry about special teams. We've had to worry about special teams far, far, far too much. I just went through it. I don't want with the Tennessee Titans. I don't want to go through it with LSU. So having that consistency, I think, is invaluable. So again, punter Jay Bramblett has announced that he will be returning to LSU in 2023. Now, coming up next, it's a Thursday, but it's a Mailbag Wednesday on a Thursday. So I'll get into your questions coming up next. But before we do that, I have to tell y'all about one of my favorite snacks, and that is Built Bar. So if you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want to worry about the fat and the calories, then you have got to try Built Bar. So I know that we're in the new year. You might have some New Year's resolutions where you want to eat better, you want to eat right. Maybe you're just feeling gross after the holidays, weeks of eating fatty foods, maybe drinking a whole lot, and you want to start to turn around your eating. You've got to try Built Bar. So with Built Bar, it is healthy, but it's also tasty. It's really hard to stick to your New Year's resolutions whenever you're eating gross foods, that you're like forcing yourself to eat healthy. But the good thing with Built Bar is that you don't have to force yourself to eat gross foods and eat healthy, because you can eat a delicious Built Bar and also stay within your diet. They come in great flavors that won't feel like you're dieting. Churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. That doesn't sound healthy, but I promise you they are. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. You can fit Built Bar into any diet or any, eating right, any New Year's resolution. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. That's the best part. So for years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section, grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a four-bar box of cookies and cream, one of my favorites, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later. All right, it is a Mailbag Wednesday on a Thursday. We just had so much content this week that I had to push the Mailbag Wednesday to Thursday. But thank you to everybody who's been sending in questions. I'll try to get to as many questions as I possibly can every week. Now, if you want to get involved on Mailbag Wednesday, if you've got a question for me about LSU football, recruiting 2023, the quarterbacks, if you have a question about LSU basketball, what we've seen, if you have a question about LSU baseball, we're getting so close to the season and I'm so excited about it. Anything LSU related, feel free to get those questions in. You can tweet me at Caroline Fenton1. You can also follow me on Twitter at Caroline Fenton1. You can tweet and follow, send DMs to at LockedOnLSU as well. And also feel free to just comment them below. If you're watching on the YouTube page, you can comment the questions. I'll write those down. I'll make sure to get those in next week's Mailbag Wednesday if I'm on time with a Mailbag Wednesday on a Wednesday next week. But let's get into it. First question is, I wanted to pick this question. I got a bunch of questions in. Thank you for sending those in. One question that I wanted to make sure to get to because I feel like I have been neglecting. This is LSU basketball. This question is, how do you feel about the tough loss in basketball against Kentucky? I am not neglecting basketball in true conscience. I don't intend to do that. I fully planned on talking about the really great game that we saw at LSU against Kentucky. There's just so much going on with LSU football, transfer portal, recruiting, bowl game that has just kind of, taken priority. But look, LSU lost to Kentucky after that huge win against Arkansas, marquee statement win against Arkansas. You lose to Kentucky, but I look at it like this. You were a 10-point underdog which I felt was ridiculous. I think that the sports books grossly underestimate LSU and grossly overestimate Kentucky as far as basketball is concerned. But I mean, that's a tale as old as time. Kentucky basketball being overrated. But you were a 10-point underdog and you lose by 3 points. Final score 74 to 71. LSU fought hard in that game. LSU's defense showed out. I think the difference was Oscar Tshiebwe is just that good. I think LSU basketball played really tough against Kentucky, and I think they proved something. I always said this about football, and it's true with every single sport. You can have a lot of takeaways and learn something in a loss, and you can also have some bad things that you take away from a win. And there were a whole lot of good things that I took away from this LSU basketball team, even in a loss. This was Matt McMahon's second SEC game that he coached. It's 1-1 in SEC play against two of the top teams in the conference. And they played close all game long. They played hard all game long. LSU was in that game. Coach Cal is regarded as one of the top coaches in the sport. Matt McMahon is in his first year at LSU. Matt McMahon is in his first year at LSU after having 0 scholarship players less than a year ago. So I understand a loss is a loss. I understand that LSU can't afford very many of them. But I'm going to take that as a moral victory, as loser talkish as that might sound. I take that Kentucky, a narrow Kentucky loss, I take that as a moral victory. And I take that as an opportunity to be really excited about what this LSU basketball team can become, about the foundation that Matt McMahon has built and how quickly he's built it. So, tough loss against Kentucky on the road, probably the most rowdy environments in college basketball. Rupp Arena is not a very easy place to play. And LSU basketball held their own. And a year that's supposed to be a quote-unquote rebuilding year, it doesn't look like there's much rebuilding to do. It looks like that thing's already built. But I appreciate your basketball question because I do feel bad. I feel like I've been neglecting basketball a little bit. I promise I won't do that. I promise you. Second question is, if you could pick one word to describe LSU's win in the Citrus Bowl, what would it be? I like this. I think this is fun. And I think that if you're listening, you're probably thinking of one word in your head that seems like the most obvious word. And that's dominant. Because that's exactly what that was. That was a dominant win. 63-7. I understand that LSU was going up against Purdue's B and C team at some position groups. But let's not forget that LSU wasn't at 100% full strength either. LSU had their third string quarterback, their true freshman quarterback in for an entire quarter. LSU was without 3 legitimate starters on the defensive line alone. LSU wasn't at 100% full strength either. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you're playing. Putting up 63 points in a college football game is impressive. So I'll say dominant. And I feel like that's the more obvious word. So since that feels obvious and since that seems kind of like a cop-out, I'll say this. Promising. Because I watched that game and that made me so excited for next season. I felt like, man, this team is in good hands. This roster is in good shape. Because even though it was a backup quarterback that had only had 2 starts under his belt in the 6 years in college football, LSU still held that offense to 7 points. And I know that this Purdue defense wasn't at full strength. Neither was LSU's. But they still scored 63. So I left that game, and even though LSU had a great season, better than anyone could have expected in Brian Kelly's first year, just like LSU basketball, doesn't look like there's any signs of slowing down next season. In 2023, I watched that Citrus Bowl, and I thought, man, this looks like a freaking promising team, a really exciting team to watch in 2023. But again, send your questions in for a Mailbag Wednesday. I'll promise I'll be on time next week. A Mailbag Wednesday for next week. You can tweet those in, DM them to me, comment them on YouTube, however you want to get those questions in. I will take those questions for a Mailbag Wednesday. But again, this week, Mailbag Wednesday on a Thursday. It might be. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. Coming up on tomorrow's podcast, let's take a look back at the season as a whole and also a step forward. We'll take a look forward. What parallels are there of LSU's program where it is right now to another SEC program that has emerged as becoming one of the most dominant teams in college football? We'll get into all of that on Friday's edition. But for your second listen, check out our brand new podcast, Locked on College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big name experts, coaches, and players throughout the entire college basketball landscape. Locked on College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.